Good morning 4-2. For today's lesson, you only need your math workbook, and we will continue to solve math word problems involving interpreting fraction as a set. So please turn to workbook page 136 and let's look at question 8 together. So the first thing you do when you come to word problem is to break it down into smaller sentences. So, a water tank holds 81 liters of water when full. What does it mean by full? It means completely filled. So this water tank can actually hold up to 81 liters of water. The next part, 5 out of 9 of the tank is currently filled with water. So since I know that the tank is able to hold 81 liters of water when full, I know that 5 out of 9 of the tank simply means 5 out of 9 of 81. So, how much more water is needed to fill the tank completely? So first thing first, I will be able to draw a long bar which represents 81 liters. So, how many parts am I going to cut my bars into? Yes, I'm going to cut it into 9 parts because the denominator here is 9. So I will cut this long bar into 9 equal parts. So since I know I'm going to cut into 9 equal parts, this is how your model should look like. So the whole model represents 81 liters and you need to cut them into 9 parts like this. So I know that 5 out of 9 of the tank is completely filled with water, meaning out of 9 units, 5 units will be filled with water. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these 5 units here will represent the tank that is filled. So since this tank is made out of 9 units and 5 units are filled, how many units of water do you think we need to completely fill the tank? Yes, the remaining 4 units here would be what is required to fill up the tank completely. So this is where you draw your question mark. So from this model, it clearly shows you that 9 units here represents 81 liters. So I know that 9 units represents 81. So I can move on to find 1 unit, which is actually 81 divided by 9, which would give me 9 liters. And since I know that the number of units of water needed to fill the tank completely is 4 units, I can just move on to find 4 units. So since I know that 1 unit is 9 liters, 4 units is just 4 times 9, which would give you 36. So please remember to write your number statement, your word statement with your units. So 39 liters of more water is needed to fill the tank completely. Let's move on to the next question. Please turn to page 138 and let's look at question 2 together. So first thing first, what you do is first break the word problem into smaller sentences like this. So, the first sentence tells you that Mrs. Tay had $120, which means you will be able to draw a bar and label it 120. So, she spent half of her money on a watch and 1/5 of it on a blouse. So, I separate the sentence into two shorter sentences here because the word and indicates that there is two different ideas and two different things happening here. So you can break your long sentence into two smaller sentences and focus on the first part here. So she spent half of her money on a watch. So half of her money meaning she will spend half of 120. So for 120, how many parts am I going to cut it into? Yes, I will first cut it into 2 parts because the denominator for half is 2. So I will cut 120 into 2 parts like this. And I know that she's going to spend this amount on watch. So she's also going to spend 1/5 of it on a blouse. What do you think this it represents? Very good. This it refers to her money. And how much do you think her money actually represents? Very good. Her money represents $120. So this whole bar now is my $120. So 1/5 of it meaning 1/5 of $120. So how many units should you have cut your $120 into? Yes, it should have been 5 because the denominator here is 5. However, you already cut this into 2 equal parts. How can you actually still cut it into 5 equal units? What you can do here is you find the common denominator between half and 1/5 because half and 1/5 is both based on $120 here. So you can move on to find the common denominator between half and 1/5. And what is the common denominator? Yes, it's going to be 10. So half is the same as 5 out of 10 and 1 out of 5 is the same as 2 out of 10. In other words, she's going to spend 5 out of 10 of her money on watch, which means 120, I'm going to cut them into 10 equal units. So since it's already evenly divided here, I know that total is going to be 10 units. I can just subdivide this into 5 units and 5 units each like this. So 5 out of 10 is spent on watch and 2 out of 10 will be on blouse. So total here is 10 units. 2 units would represent here. So how much did she spend altogether? So altogether would be a combination of watch together with my blouse. So now, if you just look back at our model, you would be able to see that a total of 10 units here represents 120. So I know that 10 units represents 120. So I can move on to find 1 unit, which is 120 divided by 10, which will give you $12. And the total number of units that he spent on watch and blouse is 7 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can just move on to find 7 units, which is equals to 7 times 12, which will give you 84. So 7 units here represents $84. And then you can write down your word statement, and please remember to include your units. Okay, so as you can see for this question, if you drew the model, it's stated very clearly. So whenever you draw your model, please look back to see what does the base refers to. So half of her money, we know that her money, which is 120, is my base. That was why I drew a whole bar to represent 120 at first. And since I know she spent half of the money and my denominator is 2, I will cut my 120 into 2 equal parts with the red color ink. And then I know that she spent 1/5 of her money on blouse, which means my base of 120, I need to now cut into 5 parts. But then I realized that with the initial cut into half, I can never cut my original bar back to 5 parts. Therefore, I move on to find the common denominator between 2 and 5, which is actually 10. So I know that 5 out of 10 of the money will be spent on watch, and 2 out of 10 of the money will be on blouse, which gives me the same denominator for her money, which is how I got 10 units here. And since 5 out of 10, I will take 5 units for watch. And since 1/5 is equals to 2 out of 10, I will take 2 units to represent my blouse. Let's move on to the last question for today. Please turn to page 140 and let's look at the problem-solving word problem. So similarly, the first step we do is actually to break down your word problem into smaller sentences. So, Peter spent 3 out of 8 of his money to buy a pair of skates. So, if I were to draw a model for this, I'm going to draw one bar that looks like this. And am I able to label the total here, just based on the question? No, I'm not able to, but looking at this part here, I know that I can cut my model into 8 units. So, I will cut this into 8 units. And out of these 8 units, I know that 3 units is going to be spent to buy a pair of skates. So 1, 2, 3. 3 units would be to buy skates. The amount of money he spent was 68 less than the amount of money he had left. So, where do you think 68, what do you think 68 actually represents? Does it represent the amount of money that he spent? Or does it represent the amount of money that he left? The answer should be no. 68 represents the difference. How do I know 68 represents the difference? Which part of the sentence do you think it hints me? Okay, you should be able to tell me that less than here actually indicate that you are comparing. And in this case, what are you comparing between? You are comparing between the amount that he spent and the amount that he had left. So the difference between what he spent and what he's left is actually 68. So now, let's go back to our model here. If he actually spent 3 units here, can you see that 5 units would be what he left? But do you think these 5 units actually represent 68? No, because 68 represents the difference between what he left and what he spent. So actually the difference between 5 units and 3 units is actually 2 units. And the question is asking you, how much money did Peter spend on the pair of skates? So, what the question is finding is actually this. So, from this model, you can already clearly see that $68 represents 2 units. So, since 2 units is 68, you can move on to find 1 unit, which is equals to 68 divided by 2, which will give you 34. Since I know that 1 unit represents 34, and the amount of money he spent on his skates is actually 3 units, I can just move on to find what is 3 units. So 3 unit is equals to 3 times 34. Which will give you your final answer here. So since you already found how much he spent, so please remember to write down your word statement together with your answer. Now, how can we check to make sure that our answer is correct? So from your answer, you should have found out that he spent $102 on skate. So since I know that he's going to he had $68 more for the leftover, I can move on to find how much money did he left. So I simply just need to take 102 plus 68, which will give me 170. So this is the amount left. So since I know how much he spent, I know how much he left, I can go on to find the total amount of money that he had, which is 102 plus 170, which will give you 272. So he has a total of 272 and he spent 102. So what fraction of his money was spent on skate? Yes, you should be able to tell me he spent 102 out of 270 of his money on skate. And if you reduce this, you should realize that it gives you 3 out of 8. So 3 out of 8 of the money was spent on skate, which actually tallies with what the question states here, where he spent 3 out of 8 of the money to buy the skate. So since you are able to reduce it back to 3 out of 8, this shows that your answer $102 is actually correct. So we have come to the end of today's YouTube lesson. I hope you will be able to, if you still are unable to understand what we went through, please relook through the videos again because the questions today are slightly more challenging. However, I hope that with the help of the model, it helps you to be able to better visualize what is actually going on in the question. So if you still have any doubts or any questions about what we went through today, I would strongly recommend you to look through the video one more time. And it is very crucial for you to be able to come up with the model so that you can solve it using the unitary method which you have already learned. So once you understand clearly the few questions that we went through today, please go on to my individual timetable for HBL for today to look at the piece of assignment that I require you to do. And make sure you read carefully on what questions to post on Showbie, as well as the questions that you are expected to mark by yourself. So similarly, questions that I require you to post on Showbie, I expect you to show me your model, number statement, as well as your word statement. Thank you.